here's what I'll tell you about your essay for tomorrow. It's going to be similar in the sense that you are going to have some kind of statement that you are going to be responding to. So in this case, you have Alexei Carrel. Chances of you knowing really the person, the background of the person whose quote it's going to be, I would guess is fairly minimal. It's not expecting that you better know this person because that's going to mean everything about it. I don't think that's going to be the case. But what I will do is, since you're going to be getting a quotation, a line from this person, I'll certainly give you the years so you have an idea of the era, and I'll also give you the discipline or the profession that this person would be coming from. So, as a scientist, a few observations and much reasoning lead to error, many observations and a little reasoning lead to truth. I think it kind of makes sense that a scientist would be making some kind of statement about observations leading to truth, error, or something along those lines. It'll also be the same with this part down here at the bottom, that when you are writing your essay, you have to have at least one body paragraph. It's up to you whether you want to have 2, 3, 4, whatever. That at least one body paragraph is going to be centered around Siddhartha, or the equivalent of one body paragraph. So, Johnny could have one body paragraph all about Siddhartha. Izza could have 2 body paragraphs that are all focused on Siddhartha. Libby could have 2 body paragraphs. Maybe half of one paragraph has Siddhartha, half of the other has Siddhartha. That would still equate to one paragraph. I would be okay with that. So I want some evidence certainly kind of coming from the book as to how it would pertain to it. I would caution you, though, against using the book as your sole reference. And the reason I say that is because of the rubric that's on the back of your prompt, which is pretty much the same rubric that we've been using now for quite a while. Any ideas where you could get limited if all of your evidence is coming from Siddhartha? And I would say sophistication, yes. Okay. And we're going to kind of try to break this down as to, okay, what would be some statements that you would do? But if you're going, well, here's how it applies in Siddhartha, and here's also where it kind of applies in Siddhartha, it's not that you're wrong, but your scope, your range of evidence that you're looking at, it's just coming from one general area. Same thing if you wrote this whole thing about here's why it's the case in science, coming from one general area, it's going to limit the validity of that big picture. Morgan cannot touch on science, economics, Siddhartha, Ryan's basketball game, and TV broadcasting all in one essay, but she can certainly try to hit multiple facets of life as to how this may or may not be the case. The tricky thing with the sophistication point, especially when you don't know what the prompt is going to be, is you can't game plan and go, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to write that rebuttal paragraph, or I'm definitely going to write about how this is going to pertain to college life, high school life, my future career as a whatever it is that you're going to do. What are you going to do? Yeah.
I want to be a stage manager.
Good for you. You got a goal. So she can't go into it going, that's how I'm going to tie into this essay until you actually kind of see the prompt. No, you're going to do it. She doesn't feel as confident sharing.
Yeah, I'm not a writer, but I just thought I'd take this class.
She could be the stage manager.
Yes!
There we go. Figured it all out.
You got it.
Any other questions kind of coming to mind? As at least you're doing a DRQ. You're going to have to write about Siddhartha. The whole essay does not have to be about Siddhartha, which does probably mean what's the chances of you covering everything in the book? Pretty minimal. But what you do choose from the book, the expectation is that you're going to know that part fairly well, and you'll pick the details that are coming from it. And it could be that Shay picks part of the story, has good detail. That doesn't mean automatically, hey, you got a 4 in evidence and commentary. Well, was it the right example to kind of go with that would best illustrate it? Those kinds of things. But the expectation would be whatever parts you do cover in this, you have detail with it. You don't have to quote. You're not going to be using your book. You don't have notes because you don't know what that prompt is going to be. So I'm not expecting that you kind of quote things. If you remember something that Siddhartha said or Govinda said or whoever, by all means you can go in and use that. But there's not that expectation that Ethan better have something from part 1, he better have something from part 2, and he better have a third thing from some other place in the text. That creative writing part 3.
Because you're always supposed to have
you're not. Yeah, you're not going. I don't.
So not like.
The chances of everyone being able to are slim. Not because of your own fault. It's just probably not going to work. Now, if talking about sophistication, if I write something and I'm solely coming from one part in the book, like when Siddhartha and Vasudeva first meet, hey, I'll be back and we'll be friends, and that's how I'll pay you. And you write about that, but then you're also able to come back to when he does actually come back and how that all validates. I mean, you're probably doing a better job than I am because you're tying in more examples and going into more detail. But there's not that you have to cover X, Y, and Z within the text because you're probably not going to do that with one body paragraph. No. Okay, so the only time I make you do rebuttals would pretty much be when you have a take home, because from a paragraph standpoint, you don't know how much you're going to write. You could certainly qualify being different from a rebuttal, because remember, qualify, you see the merits for both sides. So Morgan's looking at her dress options over there. I go, I like this one. She says, no, I don't really like that one. Marie could qualify and go, well, here's the nice thing about this one. Here's the nice thing about that one. But ultimately, I side with Morgan and Mr. King. We're not listening to your fashion advice. She qualified. As opposed to rebuttal of, well, here's why that one would not work. I have no problem with you doing rebuttals. I like rebuttals. Just don't have your rebuttal be your second paragraph, and then that's second body paragraph, and then essay ends, because you probably didn't give yourself enough to advance it. If you have time, and you might, because you're kind of getting used to writing a little bit more. If you do have time, that could be a good third body paragraph. It could be a good second body paragraph as long as you can back it up then with something else after. But you would want at least two body paragraphs advancing your argument in addition to anything you decide to do as a rebuttal. But the nice thing about rebuttals is it's illustrating that you're aware of other reasoning out there. You're acknowledging it, but here's what that viewpoint is kind of missing. And make no mistake, it does not matter if you defend, if you refute, if you qualify. It's totally up to you. We're not going, you better defend this. It's absolutely right. Any immediate reactions to a few observations and much reasoning lead to error? Many observations and little reasoning lead to truth?
I was just like, as I was sitting here trying to compare it to Siddhartha, because we have to use it as part of our development. And I remember when he was having his epiphany here, the tree, when he woke up from his nap, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, the knowledge I had, I had to go and observe other people to find myself instead of just knowing everything. So I feel like that kind of in a way.
I was doing this yesterday too. Okay, so with Siddhartha, where the fact that he has to go through and do things, and that's going to be kind of like his observations more so than anything else. So the
And that you can't teach him those things, that knowledge doesn't equal wisdom. Wise people have truth.
So for him, there's the necessity to observe, and probably, could do an and or experience. I'm not just going to watch, but I'm going to live that life, whether it be as a merchant, whether it be as a samana or a Brahmin, lover, father, friend, rock, kind of by the end of the story. So going through all of those things, and I agreed when you said it, and I already forget what the second part you said was about, I think, with the thinking.
That you said knowledge is wisdom, and wisdom typically leads to truth.
Okay. But too much knowledge,
Too much knowledge doesn't.
or too much desire even for knowledge, is going to lead to what? Not ignoring you. Too much desire for knowledge within the context of Siddhartha, because if he's desiring it, that means he's going to suffer. Yeah, it limits what you would be doing. This would certainly be suffering. Who, Emma? Hopefully, I'm not taking answers that you were going to say. Who warns him of this? Be careful. You know, when he has this conversation with Buddha, they talk about this, and he goes, "You might want to be careful what you're kind of looking for. If you desire too much to seek for information, it could kind of lead to some suffering." And then, yeah, you know, this kind of comes into practice as he ends up doing all of these things.
I was gonna say how like in the beginning he thought he wanted to be like Simone, so he like starved himself. He like tried to take away all of those desires, but he found that he couldn't reach his true potential. Because he was saying how everyone has that like inner Buddha, and you just have to realize that potential.
And
That was his way of error, because he couldn't reach that wisdom that he was seeking, at least through Buddha.
And I think it was like, you know, when we did your reading check quiz for the first part, I think your last question, from whom does he decide that he must learn from? Himself. You know, yeah, it's not going to be the Buddha, it's not going to be my father, it's not going to be the Samana that I hypnotize, it's not going to be you, Govinda, sorry, but it's going to have to kind of come from myself. So must realize your own potential, and that has to be something that you do, you know, as yourself, individually, you know, things along those lines. So yeah, all of these things would certainly work. You know, when it comes to like details, you know, if we were going with this first one, the necessity to observe or to experience different aspects of life, correct? Something that you would want to kind of throw in afterwards, which we did subsequently. This is why his time, you know, when he's working with Ramaswamy, or when he's gambling money away, when he's feeling despair, you know, and he returns to the river and contemplates his own suicide and death and whatnot. You know, now you're getting into those kind of specific elements of the text. Not that you want to go back and reread your revision assistant essays. Maybe you do. But I think looking at that conjunction sheet could be a good thing so far as looking at words such as, not that they're, you know, brand new to you by any means, but because, since, however, while, when, those things tend to emphasize relationships. So as you make a general statement, then you specify with a conjunction, it's going to force you to kind of get into a little bit more detail about it. So, you know, those could be a list of words to kind of just look over. Which one from there do you find that you actually like and could be pretty useful? But we're not going to go, Johnny, you were supposed to go simple, compound, complex after your quote. Why did you not do that in your body paragraph? That's not something that we're going to be looking at. But we made Johnny write simple sentences, which I appreciate. Because what's your middle name?
Excess wordiness.
He had to fight, but we did. Good job. Anything else from Siddhartha?
This is less from Sonata, but I think I would qualify it more than defend or refute. Because I think the first one is accurate. Like when you don't have a lot of knowledge and you just try and reason through it, then often you're inaccurate. But even when you do have a lot of knowledge and you don't reason through it, you can often just if you see a pattern that's not actually connected, you can like have a logical fallacy and draw the wrong conclusion.
This could be a tricky question, so I'm not trying to put you on the spot with it. Would you reword this in any way?
I think so. Yeah.
Do you know how you would do it? Anyone else have any ideas? Because you know,
Yeah, I think I would take out the and little reasoning. I'm not quite sure how I would reword it, but I would reword that part because I think the and little reasoning kind of because often like the knowledge that you find out is not straightforward. There's not a straightforward answer to the truth.
so you have to think
You
through
have
it
to interpret
to kind of interpret it.
I
Yes.
have when you say something about the reasoning thing, or the little reasoning, I feel like he's talking about jumping to conclusions
Mm-hmm.
more than like trying to. Some people think of reasoning as like, okay, here's how this fits together, here's how this fits together. But I think in this context, he's talking more about like few observations and a lot of jumping to conclusions that needs to happen.
And I think certainly for him that would make sense because he is a scientist. So when you think of this within the realm of science, what aspect kind of comes to mind? And so how do you, really what are you doing with a hypothesis? You're actually proving that's probably not the case because experiments tend, right, so you have to go through all of this kind of, a lot of observations to prove why this is not true, this is not true, this is not true. Where many observations, and I'm not trying to overthink what I've done, I can kind of eliminate a lot of possibilities. At the same time, in Virginia, I'm not trying to say this is the way that you would want it to be worded, but I could see some people qualify and go, well, I think many observations with much reasoning is going to lead to truth because that's going to give me more experiences and the ability to kind of, figure it out. So you could kind of qualify he's right in some of his parts, but his full statement isn't quite applicable yet. And then you could certainly apply that to Siddhartha and to other things as well. So just because you defend, you can defend in part, you can refute in part, you can defend completely, you can refute completely, you could qualify where, yeah, he's right and he's wrong. Keep in mind, though, if you qualify, you still have to ultimately pick a side. So you're basically going, there's merits to both viewpoints, but when it's all said and done, this is where I end up kind of falling with it. The one way that people really will kind of shoot themselves in the foot with a qualification is at the end you do something like, and therefore that's why it's up for you to decide as opposed to you kind of picking what that argument ends up being.
How would you rate a thesis statement for a qualification?
Well, it kind of depends on what you're like. You could go, if you said Carol's statement is true in part, that's going to lead to a qualification, and it could end up kind of being like two sentences. Could do something, and Johnny and I were having a conversation about this where we're kind of coming up with, all right, these are examples that for the most part would agree with him, by not overthinking it, but observing and experiencing all these things. That's how Siddhartha does kind of end up finding his truth, his enlightenment, his nirvana. I like the book Siddhartha. Some of you do, some of you don't. But when it's all said and done, what is it still? It's just a book. And really, you can even simplify it more. It's just a story. It's fiction. All right? It is not real. So in fiction, you can kind of make whatever you want to be the case because you get to manipulate and control characters. This could be true in the fictional world, but when it comes to the real world, maybe not the case. And that could be a qualification. So if, and this would kind of lead into what I want to talk about next, what would be realms of, everyday life or careers and things like that where you would say this kind of idea is applicable? Doesn't mean right, doesn't mean wrong, but, mentioned like science would be a place that this could kind of go in. Where else could this apply? Or what aspects of science could this apply? You have an idea?
I mean, like with science, I think there's a lot of ways you could take it. Like even like you said with like the idea of a hypothesis that it's not proven. You don't prove a hypothesis correct. You prove that everything else is incorrect. And the only way you can do that is through observation in his mind.
Experimentation and things like that. Sure. Okay.
For science, you could do like essentially the Broad Street pump. A bunch of people getting sick around this water pump, and then a guy put it on a map. He's like, "Hey, it's surrounded by this water," and that was what was making them sick. So he sort of took like a lot of data and used little reasoning,
Without like avoiding the paralysis by analysis idea of whatnot. So I'm not familiar with the example you said. You said it's the what? The
Broad Street.
Broad Street pump. So many observations. Like basic reasoning. Yeah. Johnny, what were you talking about before we started? Okay, so, and again, and here's where we're getting into, and not saying that, Sarah, your example, not specific, because an unspecific example would be, and this is true in science. Okay, how so? Hypothesis explaining, the idea that it's not proven correct, but you're proving all these other ideas would be incorrect. Explaining now a specific situation, where there's some reasoning taking place. If we go with Darwin, what do we associate with Darwin? That could be a loaded question, I guess, but evolution, natural selection. what did he do? Did a lot of observations, and then you're kind of finding links between different, animal and how things would evolve and all of those things. So, this certainly could be cases where you would be able to explain, yeah, here's why observation is exceptionally important. It's not cheating, and then we'll get to you. It's not cheating to take the idea that he's a scientist and then apply that to science. Because if he's thinking it, it's probably going to be applicable to that discipline. So, if you have something that says, from, Jewish rabbi, maybe you want to look at it. Doesn't mean from a Judaic, element, but there could be a religious aspect. If it says from a novelist, maybe you do want to think about it in a writing art form or a painter, or if it says psychologist, kind of thinking in that way as best you can. But it also doesn't mean that you have to go with science. Whatever is in the prompt to help you, use it, but don't feel like it's there to trap you.
When it says like you can use evidence from your own experiences, how can you like keep it sophisticated while also like sharing that kind of like personal story?
So sophisticated doesn't automatically mean the words that you use. And
like using like I or like
right, yeah, you can do that because it's going to sound more clunky to go the writer of this essay or hypothetically speaking, a female junior high school student who sits next to Libby, wants experiences. No, you're going to go with my own personal experience, and that sophistication, can be kind of recognizing some of those complexities. So I mentioned, and again, not trying to make you do this, but going, well, yeah, this is true for Siddhartha, but guess what? This isn't going to be true necessarily for a high school student because if there's little reasoning, if I'm jumping to conclusions or if I'm allowing a first impression to rule my decision making, I'm probably going to be running into some mistakes and some problems. If I go with, yeah, you know what? That person's an AP Bio, 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 and they're miserable, I shouldn't take AP Bio. Well, but if I'm going to be, if that's that career element that I'm going with, and I need to kind of work on perseverance and someone a little bit, yeah, I do need to do that. So, we want to avoid the cliche, don't judge a book by its cover, where, I'm just kind of making that initial reaction. That could be a very astute observation, on the part of you or someone else.
Would it be better to use like a personal experience or just use like kind of like what we did with like the scientists and use like those specific real world examples?
I apologize for this horrific answer. You want to go with the best example. So if there's something that has happened to you that you know about, that's circumstance with family, friends, or whatnot, and it really seems to tie into that, then yeah, that's what you want to go with, assuming that you explain how it ties in. It would be silly to force feed something into, when I played 5th and 6th grade basketball, my coach told me to do this, but I made a whole bunch of observations, and that's probably not going to work as well as if it's between Darwin and you as a 3rd grader at Chuck E. Cheese, I'm probably going with the Darwin example, but who knows? Maybe that something happened with Chuck E. Cheese. Food, like kind of going with what Ethan was saying. If you have a food allergy, that might be something that you could mention where there's a lot of observations that are going into it, and we had to do a lot of reasoning to figure out what was going on so that I didn't end up having whatever that issue would be. Virginia, did you?
I was going to say I kind of applies to therapists because when they try and diagnose someone, they don't want to jump to an instant conclusion because they might be wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So they have to spend a lot of time talking with them.
And especially in the medical field, I mean, if it's a wrong diagnosis, you could be opening yourself up, to potential damaging lawsuits. It could be kind of ending career, and things like that. So yeah, you could certainly tweak the wording and explain why you disagree, if you want to kind of qualify it. But yeah, you could absolutely medical, psychological diagnosis taking place. Maybe you've had experiences as like a sibling. Emily doesn't want to write about those right now. But a lot of things where observations are taking place, and you know what? yeah, I do have to have a kind of lot of reasoning if I'm going to better work with someone, people person and things like that. If Shay's going to be that prima donna, actress, Libby has to know what's going to be the best way to handle her, with care, as opposed to, she makes a mistake, just call her out. That's what you do. So yeah, it all depends. And I know that's a crappy answer, but it does depend.
I think this could also apply to law, like, especially in criminal cases. Like, if you don't have a lot of hard evidence and you just do a bunch of circular reasoning, you're probably not gonna win the case. But if you have a lot of evidence and also explaining it well,
And you mentioning circular reasoning, Virginia, I think you said fallacies, earlier on. So yeah, you could even kind of, not trying to twist it into an argumentative standpoint, but so far as a logical viewpoint, you do have to be careful so that you avoid the circular reasonings or any kind of other fallacies that would be taken a look at. If you, law would certainly be something that you could do. You could look at it from a religious perspective, spiritual perspective, if you wanted, where you have, because you kind of start with Siddhartha's viewpoint. Maybe you want to bring in your own personal viewpoints, beliefs, ideas that have kind of been taught down. You could do the contrast between, this could make sense for things when it's more faith kind of based, where you cannot prove it, as opposed to if you're going from a legal perspective, it is this and there's no other, or it is this or this. There's not going to be that middle ground kind of thing, innocent, guilty type aspect looking at. So the hope is that you recognize, all right, here's an element from the story that would work, from the novel that would work, but here's that element from real life. And those two things, as I said, can work together to prove or disprove. It would be perfectly fine to qualify. So if you ask, how would I qualify? You could go, hey, within the context of Hermann Hesse's Siddhartha, this makes perfect sense. However, when applied to the U.S. judicial system, you really have to be careful that you don't follow it this way, or that you do. Knowing that you have to use Siddhartha as a resource, it's perfectly fine to include that into the thesis statement. You don't have to worry about, from an introduction standpoint, that you're doing all this big kind of background with Siddhartha, because Siddhartha is most likely just going to be an aspect of your argument, not the end all be all. So don't have to worry about Hermann Hesse was a German writer, blah blah blah. That you're not going to worry about. But like Siddhartha, it's going to be more of a very open-ended kind of prompt. It's going to give you the flexibility to kind of think things through. Just because Siddhartha agrees with it doesn't mean that you would have to agree with it. Just because Siddhartha would disagree with it doesn't mean that you have to disagree with it. You could use that to your advantage to kind of set up almost like a yin-yang approach. Here's one side, but here's the other two. You could go, this is wrong, because Siddhartha said, for every truth, the opposite is equally true. He's setting up the opposite, so he's wrong. Got it. No. But yeah, so that's sophistication. There's a whole bunch of different realms that we go to. Don't feel like just because I use the word persona, I have now eliminated myself. I can't. You're just choosing the right word. Take care.